That's just, yeah.
All right, we're gonna get started at first. Our first item on the agenda is approve the minutes of our September 25th meeting. And that's an action item.
Yeah, I'll move, and I have one minor typo correction.
Okay,
Do you want to wait till this?
why don't we get a second, then we'll. Second. Okay. So we have a motion and seconded.
Yeah, so on the first page, item B, ARPA update, I think it provided an ARPA update. It's an and instead of an and. I do that all the time, but so I happen to notice it because that's what I do.
I suppose you use a possessive pronoun with a gerund too, don't you? Always.
If you say so.
All right.
I'm not sure what that was.
So we have a motion to accept the minutes with that one correction. Any other comments or corrections? If not, I'll ask all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention. Well, we pass the approved minutes. So now we're back to a ARPA update, and we have Doug Farnham, a familiar face here today. Give us an update on how we're doing and also how we're looking in terms of our sort of contingent appropriations of perhaps some ARPA clawback. And the first was the 36 million that would go to that special fund for municipal recovery. Can't remember the full name of it, but I'm sure you've got it memorized. So welcome. And thank you for being here.
So for the record, Douglas Farnham, Chief Recovery Officer for the state, and Madam Chair, you give me too much credit. I am still struggling over the new acronym as well. I believe it is Community Resilience and Disaster Recovery Fund and Program. The Flood Resilient Communities Fund, just for some reason, is still welded into my mind, and it's still running and still using ARPA funds is one reason it's still very prominent. So what I'd like to do is start by giving kind of a high level snapshot and then go in and talk about specific, and I know I only have 15 minutes, so I will try not to be too slow here. Essentially, this snapshot taken through September 30th. The administration held a webinar earlier in September, had started communicating to agencies and departments in August that they were rapidly approaching the deadline. So we did see 69.7 million of new obligations by the end of September and 55.3 million of new expenditures, which is above the historical trend for expenditures. That's on line 113 of the spreadsheet.
Is there an attachment piece of paper?
This?
Oh, this. Is it the big?
The large.
Yeah, we don't have line numbers.
It's not a line item.
So at the very, very last page, I think the last page might actually be.
Yeah.
No, so the second to last page has the totals.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So at the bottom of the second to last page, going from left to right. So we have our total appropriation, 1.49 billion. And then that revenue loss figure is just for tracking of a special category of money that's more flexible and easier to apply. Then we have 1.009 billion as the total allocated. Total obligated rose to 933 million. Now that is obviously that number needs to equal 1.049 billion in the next report to Treasury. So for the 12/31 report, the total expended at 544 million, we have finally crossed the halfway point of spending ARPA funds. And then the new obligations, that 69.7 million, that is a strong number compared to previous quarters, but it actually doesn't capture the full activity. I approved a number of obligations shortly after. Some of the grant agreements were signed on October 1st, October 2nd. And so they weren't able to be included in this report, but we approved at AOA about $50 million of additional obligations that will be obligated before the end of December. And some of them, many of them have already been signed off. The biggest chunk of that is the Municipal Energy Resilience Program. Got $35.9 million worth of awards approved. So their entire outstanding grant budget was allocated to awards and approved. The legislative language around the methodology for scoring that was very, very strong. And I do feel like BGS honored that language very well. And I feel really good about the way those awards were approached. I had to take a direct hand in moving that program across closer to the finish line. So I think they're now in much better shape. And the risk of, there's no intended reversion in that program any longer
So
before I had to look at it.
in summary, then, the budget included, I believe, three identified potential areas of funding from the clawback.
Yes.
Last meeting, you had said you thought it was going to be very close, whether all that money would be available. You are confident that 36 would be. Can you just bring us up to date on where you think we're going to end up?
Yes, so keeping in mind you're looking at paper, and I already resorted this, so now it's going to be, oh, that'll make it easier.
Or you can look on the section.
Nice. So I already talked about municipal energy resilience. That was one of the larger potential sources of reversion before, and that is now no longer a need to revert. Let me find this appropriation. The next program, oh good, we are sorted by agency. So on the second page, closer to the bottom, you'll see the block of PSD programs. It starts about 8 lines from the bottom and is seven programs that are in the PSD Public Service Department.
Yes, third page.
Third page.
Oh, third page, oh, front and back.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, the third page of content. And there's a lot of programs in this area where the burn rate is far too low to achieve full expenditure by 12/31/2026. The first program that I would mention is, well, I'll just go top to bottom, that'll be easier. So there's a smaller appropriation, $5 million, and it's fully obligated and mostly expended. So that program is not really looking at any significant reversions. The next line down is also smaller dollar, not looking at a great amount of reversions. However, the third program, the Affordable Community Scale, that program does have, has only expended 3 million out of 15 million. So with 2 years to go to spend money, we do have a tool that we're using at AOA to calculate the burn rate for the program. For any program where the burn rate is significantly too low related to the appropriation, we are going to try to do what we can with that program to give them some flexibility to achieve legislative intent. This is also a very important policy area, climate investment, weatherization, emission reduction. So we're not going to just do a straight calculation and then revert the excess based on their historical burn rate. We are going to allow for some assumption of spending, but we need to limit the amount of risk that the state is going to be taking on.
Yes.
Thank you. Doug, could you just tell, what is the program? It's sort of chopped off. Affordable Community Scale, what is this?
Renewable energy.
Renewable energy?
Yeah. It's, I think this appropriation might even be used to fund several programs, primarily in partnership with Efficiency Vermont.
Yeah.
So once we do have so over the next 2 weeks, AOA will be developing the proposed reversions, and we'll be discussing them with the Public Service Department. Before we make any final decisions, we will be looping in Efficiency Vermont. They have submitted information to us on how they will be able to spend, and what they would project and how they would be able to spend the remaining funds. I think so at this point, evaluating that information and making a risk decision about how much we can afford to leave in place.
Okay.
So that program, then that set of programs will be a major source. The next one, $25 million where nothing is reported as expended yet. Well, actually, 1.5 million was reported as expended this quarter. So over 23 million outstanding to expend in that program, even though it's obligated, it's too much to leave in one place with a short track record. But we do plan to look at similar programs that Efficiency Vermont ran, give them credit for the burn rates in those programs, try to scale it up. In my opinion, weatherization is impacted primarily by a workforce constraint. And so we're going to try to give enough money to max out the workforce capability through the end of 2026. And so that's our goal, to keep as much in this appropriation as possible. I do think there will be a significant reversion there.
Are we gonna have anything left to
fill the other line.
go toward those contingent appropriations? It seems like a lot of what you're saying is this is no longer available. This is based on whatever. So that's what I'm just wondering what that bottom line looks like.
Oh, sorry. So like this $25 million line item will have a significant reversion that will go to the hazard mitigation usages. I think the exact dollar amount of that is what we're going to work on this month and then pin down. Aggregating all of the potential reversions across state programs, like we have some programs that are just done and they're returning money, much easier decisions. We will hit 36 million in total reversions to fund hazard mitigation. And we will hit the 4 million needed to support limited service positions through the end of the ARPA period. And I anticipate some amount going to VHCB, most likely somewhere in the nature of 10 million, but it could go up or down depending on decisions we make around programs that are significantly impacted, like some of these weatherization programs. The $7 million load management program in PSD, because that works through the utilities, there is more of a structure in place there, and it's not as dependent on the general workforce and individual considerations. So I think it's likely we will leave most or all of that appropriation in place. And then there's the $10 million for emergency financial assistance that was reappropriated, or I think e-board action last year.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. That will, based on the fact that 2.3 million is expended for the last year and we have an expansion, there will definitely be, and we'll give credit for the new population that's eligible for the 2024 floods, but they still definitely won't need the full 10 million. So there'll be a reversion there as well. So I think that honestly, this is the area of the ARPA portfolio where I have the most internal conflict. We need to manage the risk, but we're going to try to maintain as much as possible of the legislative intent. And I think that intent is funding as much work as could be accomplished through 12/31/2026. And then given the market conditions, we would likely use a little bit of revenue loss capacity to give those programs buffer in case any of that work does slip into 2027. We won't have to return it to Treasury. It'll count as state dollars. For most of the other programs, there are some higher dollar figures, but a lot of those dollar amounts have already been reduced by agreements, and in general, the reversions aside from that are pretty small.
I'm sorry, Rep. Woods, okay.
Doug, can I just ask, I guess, two questions? You talked about the weatherization, and I've actually had constituents get approved, but for the labor shortage have not been able to actually implement.
Yeah.
And do you have any, and I know that there's qualified providers and all of that through Efficiency Vermont. What's been the administration's role in trying to broaden the number of qualified providers?
I would say that I'm not really ready to speak to that because I oversee the fund and the
Yeah.
administration of all the different programs. I do know Public Service Department actively collaborates with Efficiency Vermont on workforce development programs. But for that specific of a question, I think
Okay.
they would be the ones.
All right.
to do it. I know we've been pushing workforce development in general as an administrative priority for years. But I think, and there was a hope, and I think it was a reasonable hope that if we provided extra funding for weatherization activities at the beginning of ARPA, that we would see the private sector respond to that and we would see more contractors taking on weatherization. And I think we haven't seen as much increase in uptake in that area as we had hoped.
And although it's a much smaller number, is the case management software upgrade at risk? That's right at the bottom of that page. I see there's only 17,000 spent out of that.
I would say yes.
I don't know if it's for the same process, but I mean, I know that there's been RFPs out on that, and I know that there are companies awaiting decisions that haven't been made.
Right. So, yes, anything with a substantial unexpended balance is definitely at risk at this point. We had those initial conversations, let people know what you filed this quarter, like what you were able to achieve through 9/30 would be the basis for the discussions in November. For programs that still have funds at risk, if they aren't able to obligate them, AOA will have no choice but to take them.
So you're saying that's at risk. That's what I'm just.
I'm not aware of, yes, I believe it is still at risk. I don't think that's one of those special cases that I approved in October.
Okay. I mean, not okay, but.
Well, maybe someone can give us an update in terms of that particular expenditure area. Representative Shaw.
Thank you. The other area that has been an ongoing concern for me is ANR, DEC. They have a lot. It looks like there's more that's getting expended, but how are you feeling about that? I know there've been staffing issues and internal workforce issues to get things done there. And how are we doing?
Much better than this appears, actually. So
Okay.
ANR was the main area where they were able to work through getting the obligations finalized. Last week, they were able to report to me that they were 100% obligated.
On all of these lists?
Oh, wow.
So there was a lot of
Activity.
work over the last
Yeah,
month,
okay.
finalizing agreements, finalizing
Nothing like
warrants.
a deadline and lots of money.
There is. Motivating factors. Okay. That feels good.
The AOT EV program was also able to achieve their obligation. The Vermont State College, ESC, appears unobligated, but that's not actually unobligated right now. It's just in transition, so that will be okay. The 6.1 million for clean water to the Agency of Ag, I don't believe is at risk. That shows as unobligated on this, but we will be able to make sure that's reported properly in the next quarter.
Thanks, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm always the person asking for pieces of paper, so I'm sorry about that, Doug. We haven't decided yet if we're gonna meet definitely in December or not, but I think regardless, it would be really helpful to have a summary memo from you on all of this as things finish shaking out.
Yes, I think, I definitely intend to, so yes, that absolutely makes sense.
Thank you.
So happy to produce it. We should have, the timeline right now is to have, the proposed reversions or the reversions the administration intends to perform, by around Thanksgiving.
Great. Okay.
So, for December, I can have that prepared by the time the December meeting would occur, whether or not.
Thank you very much.
So in summary, obviously, a lot of work has been done to make sure the money is going out, but there will be some to be clawed back, much more modest than might have been anticipated, so that not all the contingent appropriations will there be money.
Right.
The first would be the 36 million for that municipal mitigation fund, whatever we call it. And then the balance would go to the HCB. And then there was a third appropriation, but obviously we aren't going to get down that far on the list, if that's what you're telling us.
I
Am I
think,
phrasing that correctly?
yeah, I think it's, still theoretically possible, but extremely unlikely that we would get to the VHFA $25 million that's at the end of the,
At the end of the list, number
Yeah.
3.
with commitments that we've already agreed to and understood. I don't think there's a chance at this point that we get above 95 million.
But that was what that's.
And that's what the December JFC meeting would be. And I can formally communicate that with, these are the reversions.
So that was only contingent depending on how things evolve. So thank you. Other questions of Doug in terms of where we are on this? Yeah. Thank you. And anything else? We look forward to kind of a final summary of where we are in terms of available funding from the source, and appreciate your efforts to make sure that we don't return any of it and use it for the benefit of Vermonters. So thank you, Doug. We're on now to housing update, and the first is Chris Winters, who is here, and Miranda Gray, who's also here. And so their efforts, Dave, of the emergency housing. We did send out an updated report. We got it, I think, last week. But we also have it here as well. So we turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you. For the record, Chris Winters, Commissioner of the Department for Children and Families, and I'm joined by Deputy Commissioner for Economic Services, Miranda Gray. And we're here to give you an update on the progress of transitioning from pandemic era GA emergency housing. That'll include an update on the GA program, as well as some updates on shelters. Normally, Director of the Office of Economic Opportunity, Lily Sojourner, would be here to talk to you about shelters. She has a planned day off today, so I'll be pinch hitting for Lily and should be able to answer your questions. And if not, we'll get back to you. Miranda, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. For the record, Miranda Gray, Deputy Commissioner of the Economic Services Division. So I'll just jump right in. I left in on slide 2, just again, really that we'll be transitioning. The room cap will be ending as of December 1st. We're well below the room cap, which I'll get into in a moment, and then adverse weather conditions will start. So that is a solid period of time as opposed to years past where there was bridge times in November. So on December 1st, it will start and go through March 31st, and there is no longer a room cap during that time. So that is why I left the lost citation there. Currently, we have 680 households. This is as of Monday. That is left. We have about 100 households who are in their self-pay period right now. That happens at the beginning of every month. So that number is a little bit higher. I guess I'm just going to keep going until there are questions.
I do have a question, because I had someone make a comment. I don't know if it was accurate. My impression was that any of these households actually have some staff person assigned to work with them. I don't know if they're called case managers at all times. And I know we have that coordinated re-entry. I know we've really called on the collective resources of the agency, including the region AHS directors to the blueprint staff and so forth. So my question is, what when you have these households come in, and the ones that we do have, is there in fact someone assigned to work with that family to move from temporary into permanent housing, or some suitable arrangement? And or do we have a certain number of households that are getting the benefit, but that's really all they're getting at this point is the housing, the temporary housing?
So part of Act 113 said that people did need to engage with coordinated entry, and it's through that process that people are then connected to a case manager.
My question is, they have to cooperate, but if it's not being offered, then you don't have the issue of cooperation. So my question is, for everyone who's in this situation, housing situation, is someone out of any of these programs, whether within human services or, you know, what other kind of partnerships you have, assign someone to work with them?
So not every family would have someone, because there are some places that have wait lists to get into that system.
All right. And do we have a sense of what that looks like?
I don't today, but I can, it kind of ebbs and flows. I know in Burlington, there's a wait list, and that was, they had a wait list they had worked through, and now they have a wait list again. And I think it just comes down to how many households, because after you get someone housed, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need those supports. And so I think there's just a capacity issue for our partners that do have that housing case
And
management.
what about Rutland? Rutland's such an outlier when you look at, so.
Yeah, some of the partners in Rutland are struggling. They have such a larger population. They have concerns about entering into some of the hotels in Rutland, so there are safety concerns among the staff. It really depends, community to community, what kind of community partners. You know, there's a lot of success in one area of the state and not as much success in another. It's more difficult to get to people in the hotels and motels and provide them with services than it is in a traditional shelter setting, is why I think we all have this desire to move away from GA and into a more traditional shelter setting. I think, Senator, it really depends. Most people are offered services, whether or not they get connected to them on a regular basis really varies.
I think Senator Cummings had her hand up.
Well, I know the churches in Montpelier have been collecting money to pay for people to stay in the motels, families. Where do they show up in this number, or do they?
They wouldn't show up in this number. My understanding is that those families have reached their 80 days, and that's why they wouldn't be here.
Okay, so these are just the ones that haven't reached their ADAs. So,
And so two follow-ups on that.
yeah.
Do you have a sense of how many of those families are on the coordinated entry list? And can you share, if so, can you share the number of folks on coordinated entry compared to the number of folks in the motel? And then I have a totally separate question.
So in the monthly report that we need to submit, there is a coordinated entry. It is a requirement. You have to engage in that process right there. I'm not sure. Is that the
4,847?
which would be collective, right? Because not everybody works with economics.
Perhaps it'd be helpful to have an exception number, like what percentage, because it is voluntary still. I mean, it's required, but I know that people are still refusing.
Well, if they refuse, then they would be no longer eligible unless there was a valid reason for GA, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't pay for it. I mean, we would be supporting them, and I guess.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to get my head around, and I don't know if other people are too, but the gap between folks that are that the agency is actively serving and working with, and folks that are without stable housing and are either in a tent on their own, or a church is paying for their motel, or they, you know, whatever it is, so that we have a sense of the scope of the challenge that's facing us, not just the scope of your services. And sort of towards that end, my other question is the limited capacity or wait list from service providers for services from region to region. Do you have a sense of whether that is funding, or they have funding and can't hire, or whether they, like, what would it take to solve that problem?
The primary concern is workforce, it's bandwidth that we hear from providers across the state. I think funding could be a part of it. They're all funded through HOP grants, and then other services that are outside of DCF, of course. But primarily we have community partners who are saying they're having a difficult time hiring and retaining positions.
I guess we've had some discussion around this. I'm looking at Rep. Wood, and that is oftentimes, particularly people who are, might be seniors or people with disabilities have case managers through their normal service delivery plan. And the extent to which a case manager is viewed as having a responsibility, not through the HOP grant, just through the regular obligation of what they put together for a service plan for these individuals, and which is a huge resource that is currently being funded, and the extent to which there is an expectation that that those case managers would be responsible for making sure, I mean, housing is one of the most fundamental basic needs. And we've struggled with the fact I'm a case manager, but I only manage my little package of services that my program funds, as opposed to I'm responsible for the overall progress and well-being of this particular individual. So I think it's not only just the coordinated case management, coordinated reentry, but it's also the extent to which the message has gone out that this is a collective responsibility to serve these households. And it's way beyond DCF. I've said that numerous times. And the extent to which, if it isn't clear, we need to perhaps look at what are the responsibilities of a case manager for these vulnerable populations. So that's something I think the agency probably either you're doing or needs to be discussed in terms of just a matter of service protocol. But I've preached enough on that. I'm going to go to
Just quickly,
my clerk.
you set up a couple shelters, and I'm curious if you're going to cover what the pickup has been in those, because I haven't seen really much information set up, look nice on TV, but that's all I know.
A few slides in, we'll cover that, Representative.
Okay, thank you.
It's Senator Cummings, and then we'll keep going because I know what time is of the
I
essence.
switched to page 2 and saw that we have no pregnant people that are well exhausted that have exhausted their 30 days, but I keep getting these emails about we're putting women about to deliver children out on the street. Have we tracked that down at all? I know when I talked to you last, we were looking for that.
That's not a zero, but
Okay.
Yeah, so when the number is smaller than, I believe it's 12.
I
we
don't
are able to
know. You
report
can't tell us
on that, and so that's why you have the asterisks there. And yes, we do have people that we are supporting who are pregnant, but not able to share.
What happens when you deliver a child? And in my day, and I assume still, within 24 hours, you're out of the hospital. If it's a normal delivery. Where does that mother and infant go now if she's gone through her 80 days?
so they're no longer eligible for the program.
Yes.
Under the current law that we have to work with. We do try very hard in the specific cases that you talked about. We reached out to individuals. We tried to help them connect to organizations like Lund, back to the hospital, try and get them services and shelter. But they are not eligible for GA under the law as written. They'd use their 80 days.
That's why some people have actually consciously not used the full 80 day in anticipation of needing them. And you had made that point that sometimes people are making decisions around the amount of the benefit they use and when, but does that answer your question, Senator Cummings? So I guess the
It
answer is
answered
yes.
it. It doesn't make me feel very well.
I understand.
Have any of those folks moved to in either of the shelters that you've opened up for families?
I don't know the answer to that, Representative Wood. And if there are specific follow-ups, Senator Cummings, that we can do for you on the people who reached out to you directly, we can do that. You know, we had our field services folks trying to track them down, connect them to something. I don't know what the outcome was for any of
There
those.
is still openings in those family
And
shelters.
we are having families move into the shelters as we speak. And some of them do have very young children. It's one of these families.
So Senator Bruce,
To this point, we've talked about this in different settings and appropriations and also in this committee. And I believe that there was an understanding that, or a misunderstanding that there was power to make exceptions in certain extreme cases. I hear you consistently saying now that the law as written doesn't allow that discretion. So my question would be, would the administration and you all support changes to the law going forward that would give you that power to make those exceptions and give you discretion to use?
I think it's definitely worth the discussion. The biggest concern that we have always had and will continue to have is that it's really clear because it's so what qualifies for an exception.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard to draw that line and say that one person
Well, we
deserves it.
could
another
pretty
doesn't.
easily say somebody who's pregnant and giving birth
Yeah.
can't be put out on the street.
Yeah, and then I think
Yeah.
you have to look at a lot of other exceptions as well, and pretty soon you're
Yeah.
talking about
Well, and
potentially large expansion.
absolutely. So what I'm talking about is something that would go through the committee process, hopefully with testimony from the administration, AHS, all the players. And we would not be in a situation going forward where your hands are tied. And I hear you clearly saying that your hands are tied in these extreme situations, but they shouldn't be. And so I would support as we come into the budget adjustment, looking for, just want to make clear that this is an offer to work with you on it. So just trying to gauge your willingness.
Thanks.
Yeah.
so you all said, sorry, Senator Weston.
I would just say that, there has to be a way to convey the idea of numbers better than what we've got. Because if, for example, they are ending up in any of the new shelters, the new shelter in my area is gorgeous. It's a beautiful building, it's a beautiful facility, and if people are ending up there, I'm not as concerned as I would be otherwise, because our shelter is beautiful.
Mhm. Now that you have
Some of
it.
them are a little less beautiful, Senator.
Well, I understand that, but.
Yeah, talking plywood mini walls. Yes, it's better than a tent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a car.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is ongoing conversation and exactly how you and what you have for parameters, because otherwise these judgment calls get into real equity issues and.
But there has to be a better way to convey the
Yeah,
information
yeah,
about this
so,
population than we're getting.
Other comments or questions other than Ms. Repler?
So this is about call wait times and call response times. And I've had constituents contacting me and said, here's the number, you try it. So I actually did. It wasn't a good result. I wasn't going to wait an hour to maybe get somebody. So, and I know you keep data on this. So do you know off the top of your head or can easily access what your call wait times are?
Could you clarify, because there are multiple ways. There's 211, there's also.
I'm just talking about the general assistance, the
Economic service.
economic service, the general assistance line.
So for the general assistance housing line.
Yes.
That is seconds, and that ebbs and flows, right? So at the beginning or in September, when September 15th happened through the 19th, it was incredibly busy. It was hours to get through, and it was because the sheer amount of people that needed to connect with us. But now that we have much smaller numbers. It is, again, we have people that abandon after having to wait for 30 seconds. And so that expectation, however, in full disclosure, because you might have constituents calling for those that are seeking our other benefits, SNAP, TANA, fuel, that those call volumes are much higher right now. The combination of things, one of them being during the pandemic, we had reviews moved and now we have an abundance. The most reviews happen for us in the fall and we can't move them. We are working with our federal partners to understand how we might to be able to spread those out again to give us an equitable amount of reviews that have to happen throughout the year rather than having a third of them happen in a couple of months.
Okay. I'll follow up in committee. Thank you.
Yes, you'll have that opportunity. I'm just looking at the time, so, we're already a little bit behind. So you want to just keep going? I mean, obviously, it's nice to know that some shelters have opened, that's added capacity. Other comments or other pages you want to get through here?
And just quickly touch on page number 4, which has how many households have reached their 80 days, and that is 870. And we are anticipating an additional 50 households will exhaust their 80 nights through November.
And then I'll touch on shelters briefly. The increase in shelter capacity that's has happened or is happening soon from the $10 million that was appropriated last year. We put out a notice of funding. We picked 6 projects that had the most, that we thought were the most appropriate and the most viability. And you can see them there. The COTS shelter in Burlington, that's 30 beds, and that's pending acquisition of the federal building still. The Champlain Housing Trust and Voices Against Violence, some additional capacity in St. Albans, which is on track for December. Youth Spectrum Youth Services, 10 additional beds / households for youth in homelessness. That's slated for January. There's a project in Rutland where we are still trying to identify a shelter operator, and if we don't soon, we will pivot away from that to spend that money elsewhere. Good Sam did an expansion of their Elks Club for 5 beds in the Upper Valley Haven, an additional 5 beds there that are expected in December. So you can see it's I think it's roughly 85 beds or so of shelter capacity increase if all 6 of these go through. We are not optimistic about Rutland at this point in time. We've really been trying to get a provider there and haven't been able to do that. We've tried a lot of different things, and I know they're interested in purchasing a building called the Loretto Home down there in Rutland. But that doesn't look like it's happening, so we'll use that funding elsewhere. Part of that funding could go to the family shelters that we're standing up now. We're looking at all of our different funding sources to see if we have enough to cover it. And if not, we'd be prepared to come forward with something in BAA. But speaking of those family shelters, one in Williston and one in Waterbury, we opened them on November 1st through a mighty effort by a lot of folks in the Agency of Human Services and other agencies and departments. And the one in Williston in the former state police barracks has accommodations for 7 families. And we're seeing, I think we've got about 3 families using it now. The one in Waterbury also opened on November 1st, has accommodation for up to 10 families. I think we have 1 family there at the moment. We're doing intake and outreach. This is the first week. We identified a number of families that we knew were outside and reached out to them directly to talk to them about this. So they, of course, have some concerns. Those are families that we knew were in cars or in campers or in tents.
Or newborns?
Potentially with newborns. And so we're just starting to see an uptick in the usage there, and we can keep you posted as those shelters fill. But for now, you know, we identified that as one of the greatest needs of vulnerable Vermonters out there, knowing there were a couple of dozen families with children outside. And so far, we've had a few of them take us up on this offer. At some point, if we
Has
don't.
that have been offered and not accepted?
I think everyone's situation is complicated. And yes, there have been some families that decided they would find another way and declined coming to the shelter.
Senator Burns?
I'm wondering if that's the transportation issue. In other words, are these families who are right now a little distant from Waterbury and they're reluctant to wind up in Waterbury without transportation?
So what we do is we try to locate people as close to where home is for them or where their children are enrolled in school. We don't want to have that disrupted. And we do offer transportation. The Williston site is right on the bus route. In Waterbury, we would provide transportation on an individual basis, depending on what they need. There's also a bus route not too far. And we've talked to Green Mountain Transit about creating stop there if we have enough people who are using it. So transportation is probably an issue. Some families have their own vehicles, so maybe it's not. I think it's going to be different for every single family. So we're trying to do the outreach and the education and to help them get comfortable with coming into the shelter. But that's not always going to be the case. People have other options they'd rather exercise.
And then I'm remembering our conversation from some time ago about the Waterbury location. And I know that there was at least the intention to sell it on the administration's part or to use it for other purposes, BGS and other uses. Has the thinking on that shifted to having it be a permanent shelter?
I think we really have to see how it goes this winter and what kind of usage we get. And then reassess after that, see how it goes.
In other words, before there was it seemed to me like the decision had already been made not to use it as a shelter. And I know there was communications with people in the town about that.
Right.
But you're saying it's a live decision now yet to be made.
I think it is. And I do just want to take this chance to say thank you to the towns of Williston and Waterbury. They've been extremely generous. There are so many people coming out to ask, how can we help? We're organizing donations and volunteer services in each town. It's really been an overwhelming and I'm grateful for the response of the folks.
I second that. The impetus for my question is, it has seemed to me that sometimes there's the tendency to wait for the problem to get worse, put forward some shelter and then pull it back if it's not utilized 100%, close it down, take it away, and then the next time there's a surge, nothing there. So I'm thinking, I'm delighted that these are now open. I'm just wondering to what extent we're thinking about leaving them in place, because this problem won't go away next year or the year after, and we need ongoing capacity. So that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, appreciate that question. And then just that to that question, I think on the other slide, we look at emergency shelter capacity and how we're trying to expand it. This is part of that. You can see the Williston and Waterbury numbers now included in that emergency shelter capacity. We have 577 bed capacity across the state. I think that's the highest it's ever been. And so we want to continue to grow that as a better option than a hotel motel program. The other thing I'll say about these shelters, these family shelters that we just stood up, is that we have services all coming on site. So a different day of the week, we've got WIC, we've got higher ability, we have economic services, we have healthcare, VCCI nurses. So people are really wrapped in services and hopefully going to be successful in moving on to a more permanent situation. So our overall goal is expand shelter capacity while we shrink hotel motel use. And I think this fits very well into that. Again, Waterbury, not the ideal location, not the first place we would have picked. But we're that is what we were left with after providers were not able to run family shelters in other places. So I think we look at it every year. We look at it as demand increases or hopefully demand increases, decreases eventually.
So I'm sitting here looking at the clock. We're running behind. I believe we have Harrison had his hand up. I think Representative Shy, Representative Wood. I'm going to take them in that order. And then I think we're gonna, obviously there'll be a lot more discussion around the progress being made. December 1st is not coming right up, so that's gonna have some effort. Obviously, there's capacity that's been created with the two shelters that is still there. And maybe we can make sure that we're using all our case management resources so that we aren't leaving households sort of just with the benefit, but not the support. So.
Okay,
Rep.
I'll be
Harrison,
quick.
and then-
Okay, so how many did you say of the 10 capacity in Waterbury? How many families are staying there now?
At this very moment, another that we expect to intake today, but it's the first week of opening and we expect.
Okay, second question related to that is, it says until March 31, okay? That I assume that meant 2025, right?
Yeah, we haven't, I don't think we've set a specific date for the family shelters to close, but through the cold weather months.
Okay, but what happens December 1? Can these people go back to the hotel program because of?
No, we're a shelter first.
On as a
Shelter
shelter.
first.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
But I do think we want
Yeah, 25,
25,
yeah.
25, not 2024.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
next March. All right, Representative Scheid,
Yeah.
the Representative Wood, and then we're going to move on to.
Yeah.
Oh, you passed.
I am just concerned that one of the city with almost the most number of people who are homeless, Rutland is the place that desperately needs and also has the fewest emergency shelter capacity, that you can't find. You can't find a way to open it. And is it because
It's a long.
they're so
history there.
overwhelmed?
Senator Westman and I were there.
Okay, but I'm wondering if it's just, if in fact, it's just one of those downward spirals where people are so overwhelmed, the social service agencies, because there are so many, that they don't have enough capacity themselves to take on to get this. And if we could get over that hump, then that would reduce is that kind of what you're thinking about with
I
this?
think that's part of it, Rep. Shai. We've had many gatherings and conversations with the providers in Rutland. I'm a provider either in Rutland. We've actually gone to neighboring communities as well, trying to pull people into it. But they're saying they're overworked. They don't have the bandwidth. They're afraid it'll sink their organization if they try to expand into something like this.
Well,
I'll see it on the record.
It's just a sentence.
all right.
That theme is one that is extreme in Rutland and we're seeing it, but is true throughout the state. And I'm just hoping we can have a meaningful conversation with a clear plan for doing, providers are exhausted. It's very reasonable that they're saying no, but we also can't go on like this. And so hoping that in January, we can dive into that deep.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for the work that you've done so far. Obviously, still a lot more to be done. And so our next item is on VHIP. We have Alex Farrell here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. For the record, Alex Farrell, Commissioner at the Department of Housing and Community Development. So you should have two handouts, one with a recent update on the VHIP and another on MER, the Manufactured Home Improvement and Repair Program. If it's okay with everybody else with MER, I'll let it to their handout here. So this is a little bit more straightforward because it's not a significant update from the last time we were here. As you know, this program is geared toward manufactured home communities, keeping them safe and healthy, and then home repairs, either emergency home repairs or just ongoing major maintenance for the homes. This program is tapped out, so this is one where we are strongly considering a BAA ask because there's enormous need. So you can see the 6.8 million out of the 7 million obligated, that some is being held back for emergency repairs so that we can be agile and respond to those. And that is the one aspect that we're keeping applications open for all the time.
So this is separate from the mobile home infill initiative.
It is.
This would run, which is in addition to this.
Yes, this is an ongoing program. And the reason VHIP and MER are part of this update related to, Act 81/2023 is because in that VHIP and MER receive some general funds. And so, MER has been incredibly successful, but there's tremendous demand. You can see below the program totals how we've split it out between the three award types, the home repair, the infills, and the foundation awards. So to your point, Madam Chair, there's certainly some overlap in the work of this and the rapid response program, but the broader goals are different and it's the strategy is executed differently. Are there any questions about MER before we move on to VHIP?
I don't think it's a very good summary.
Okay, thank you.
I think, I don't see any, we'll move on.
I should make a quick note that the Healthy Homes program that's administered by the Agency of Natural Resources works closely with this program, and they serve a lot of the same communities. And they shared with me here that They allocated $26 million to date. The total that they had seen, the total need was over $40 million. So there's still a gap there. So you may hear requests for healthy homes, but that's in part because these are serving the same communities and there's just a tremendous need. Moving on to VHIP. So I want to acknowledge right off the bat, you all had asked for some slightly different ways to see this data. That is in the works for the next update. Our team was scrambling to get the data updated here. I do have numbers in response to some of the questions I heard last time around timing and when some of the first covenants will be rolling off, as well as VHIP 2.0, how many are the 5-year versus the 10-year. So I just wanted to flag that so you know, the next time you see one of these updates, the one pager will look different and will incorporate what I've heard from you all. But VHIP,
This shows by county, and this is something, we had heard historically a lot of housing stock, and particularly in Rutland.
yes.
And so the number of VHIP units by Rutland, obviously that's a good sign relative to the other numbers
I
of
go by
people.
that one a lot.
Yeah, so 145, I think that's we're the big winner on the VHIP side.
That's great. Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd say Rutland as well as St. Johnsbury, as you can see up in Caledonia County there. Those communities have really found ways to capitalize on this because there's such a huge need. The other homeownership center that I want to give tremendous credit to is Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. You can see their counties have really gone above and beyond. That's an area where we've had a lot of collaboration between our teams. Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust has had some staffing challenges, folks being out for extended periods of time. And so our staff is actually going to drive out and support their staff by doing some of the visits to make sure that these grant agreements can keep moving. So we work really well and really closely with
So
them,
VHIP is fully subscribed at this point as well.
very much so.
Because I had an email, I think from Senator Lyons, there was, I believe, a motel that was interested in moving and taking advantage, but the money in VHIP was not available at that point.
There is still funding available. So I guess I should clarify. So we've just signed grant agreements with the homeownership centers for the last 6 million that we have, which was appropriated last session. So the homeownership centers still have funding from their last allocation, and they're about to get another allocation, but they have long wait lists. So I mean, they're working through applications and they do
But
that.
you're familiar with the situation that, I believe it's in Shelburne, maybe?
A hotel in Shelburne.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
to maybe a little more specific? So I imagine VHIP is generally for smaller projects. And when I think of a motel conversion, I think of VHCB money. And is that also how your brain works?
100, yes.
And that's why I was surprised that the reference was to VHIP relative to the conversion, which has been obviously a way of bringing a number of units on very quickly.
Yeah, it's a timely comment, Rep. Kornheiser, because we were wrestling with how to make sure that VHIP doesn't just become one more source. The idea is to access and encourage folks, property owners who wouldn't otherwise provide affordable housing in the way that we think of it. And so we want to make sure that it's getting to those applicants and not just sort of the folks that already have access to some of these larger sums of money. There are built-in caps. So if you're creating new units, if there's more than 8 in the building, you cannot access VHIP. You are not eligible. So programmatically, we're actually discussing ways to rein that in even more to make sure it continues to meet the intent.
Makes sense.
So I want to speak briefly to the timing. I know there's a lot of folks looking at when some of these the first batch of 5-year covenants will be rolling off. So 2022 was the first year that units were completed. And so the covenants started, and there were only 13 of all these units you see here, only 13 started started their covenants in 2022. So in late 2027 will be the first VHIP covenants. Technically, it wasn't VHIP yet, but that will be rolling off. So that is when we'll start seeing some of those. Of the units here, if you're looking at the pie charts, the yellow and the green are all under the 5-year covenants with the homelessness requirement. The blue is VHIP 2.0, where people have an option. Of those, 96 units are falling under the 10-year forgivable loan to the more relaxed requirements. and 62 are opted for the 5 years, so the homelessness requirement. So within VHIP 2.0, we are seeing a slightly higher uptake of the 10-year than the 5-year. I know that's something that folks had asked about.
Representative, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I'm just curious, will you be collecting data on the, I guess maybe, potential, there's fear that the result will be when that clause goes, when that time period ends, that people will then be losing their homes again. So will you be collecting data on that? Is there any kind of communication that's ongoing with these folks who have received these grants/loans?
Yeah, right now it's mostly just anecdotal. What we're developing right now is our annual recertification process that all of these folks under these covenants will have to submit to. They'll have to submit a recertification to us. We are trying to build into that some way to get from these property owners what their plan is after the covenant ends.
Yeah.
We obviously have no legal mechanism to control that. Our hope is that this has built bridges between these private property owners and these services agencies. And we're hopeful that that keeps people in their homes, and there's a lot of reasons.
Should be tracked though, because historically, this was done back in the, what?
I'm agreeing with you, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Because I remember back in the days of early economic opportunity, there was efforts to do this. And what was happening is once the time limit came, then they went onto the market rates and they weren't affordable anymore. So that was one of the concerns around making this investment relative to something more perpetually affordable. So I do think that it's something, it's an area that we really need to look at, whether in fact this was just a short-term expediency, move money out, and then the homeowner has the advantage and the tenant can't afford to stay there anymore.
Well, and then government has made an investment in
Right.
private property that hasn't benefited the public in the long term. So I actually want to prove that point to be an error. I would, hope that we can do just as you said, but I don't think we should just rely on hope that that will happen. I think we should be collecting the data to see whether or not there's efforts that we can do to be more than hopeful, but to be able to, report to the public and have some level of accountability that the resources that we invested on their behalf are still going towards the public good.
Yeah, I absolutely. And that I see the recertification process as the mechanism for that. We'll need to be transparent with the public that we did sign on for 5-year covenants and we have no power to compel them even to report their plans to us. And to that point, I would say that even where we don't get data, we at least have more housing units. I agree. What we would prefer is they keep them at HUD fair market rents.
Mm-hmm.
In the absence of guaranteeing that, we still do have at least 500, well, over 1,000 new units that we can point to.
Mm-hmm. Other questions or comments? And you have this is very concise what you've given us, so.
Certainly,
And look forward to the new format
yes.
next time. Other questions about? How are we doing on the new mobile home initiative?
Do you want to move to that agenda item now?
Am I out of order here? Oh. But as chair, I'm going to say you're in the chair, so give us a brief update and then we'll move on.
I thought I was off the hook, Madam Chair.
No.
Is it okay if I invite up 2 experts to support me here, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
So I'll invite
Sure.
Kathleen Burke from State Housing Authority, Stacey Andre from AOT, the 2 entities that are operating this program.
I got my thing.
Okay.
Just
Good. And we don't need exhaustive, but we would like to know the progress made so far.
I can be very quick, and then you have a 1-pager which has data, so. But I also wanted you all to see the drivers of this initiative. I deserve.
This document here,
That's right. That's right.
we love 1-pagers.
Yes.
And graphs and pictures.
And number.
So thank you.
Mhm.
So, I don't know who of the 3 wants to start, but
I can summarize and then, these folks can answer any questions if that works. Chair.
Okay.
So the 30 mobile home lots and then the 9 existing mobile home parks, we discussed this last time. They're scheduled to be improved and the new homes installed by December 15th, 2024. So that's slightly ahead of schedule. So far, 19 of the lots have already been improved, thanks to the great work from the AOT team. And they're ready to receive the mobile home units. All 30 of the mobile home units are in production. Thank you to Kathleen's team for their quick movement on that, with 3 units delivered to Vermont and scheduled for installation next week. And that will be in Birchwood Manor, and that's in Milton. As of November 1st, we opened up applications for flood survivors. And then the next phase will be opening up registrations for, we'll be opening
General
up
public.
applications for the general public on the 15th. So that's the broad strokes. And then you can see the data here in the one pager. So I'll open it up to questions.
Well, why don't we have,
You want to dive into more?
Do you want to see if they have any questions?
Kathleen and Stacy, just want to speak to your role and, obviously you've gotten a good response in terms of the homes manufactured and the contracting. I guess you're getting good prices as well, but if you could just give us a brief update, I think the committee would be interested.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Stacy Andre, Mobile Home Infill Program Co-Chair. And yes, it's been going a whirlwind. Really, we've been started since we got the funding. We've moved forward, had all 9 park owner agreements executed, and that kicked off the job order contracting, the construction contracts for all of the lots and all 30 units, lots that we've been looking at. We also worked with VSHA to put out contracts through BGS, Buildings, Grounds and Services, through the state. So we were utilizing their expertise to get incredible quotes for the 30 units. So we did an all 30 unit contracting. And then while we were waiting for those to be awarded, we began preparing the lots for improvement. And right now we have 19 out of 30 lots improved, with the remaining.
Improved meaning they're ready for a siting?
They are, they have been upgraded with a concrete slab that will fit exactly to the requirements for the mobile home unit that is designated for that particular park and lot. So there was a lot of back work that happened with the vendors to be able to match the lot in the lot park and match what was going to happen for the construction, as well as working with VSHA collaboratively with the park owner for the best fit and finish of the models that are going into those parks. So it was really important to be able to make sure that the park owner had say. Some parks are family friendly and have kids and that more family oriented. So we wanted to make sure we had a little bit larger units to be able to accept home families. And then we had others that were more smaller, maybe a little bit more on the 55 or over retired side. So we had more 2-bedroom, 2-bath type of floor plans. Lots of different models, all energy efficient. So it's been great. And then really just trying to get our website ready to go to launch. So we did have a soft opening in the end of October, opened it up. And then on November 1st, we opened it up to flood survivors only. And so that has been successful, and I'll have Kathleen speak to that.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kathleen Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont State Housing Authority. Thank you. So picking up where Stacy left off, yes, we opened the wait list to begin receiving applications from interested buyers. And again, the first 2 weeks of the opening is limited to households displaced as a result of flooding from the 23 event or the 24 event. So just in less than a week, just this morning, we had received 12 applications from this particular cohort. So staff are now reviewing those, determining eligibility against sort of the core guidelines of the program, which are very broad. Being a Vermont resident, having an income at 120% AMI or below, and so on. And so we will obviously working very closely with that cohort of applicants who have already applied. And then on the 15th, the portal will be open to all Vermont households that might otherwise be available. We're very excited and encouraged about the success of this initiative. We've lots of conversations with our homeownership center partners, along with various banking institutions around the state. Vermont Federal Credit Union is very excited about this initiative and is putting together a specific loan.
That was one of the concerns,
Yeah.
obviously, when you're dealing with mobile homes, and that is the history of the difficulty of getting financing because of depreciation.
Absolutely.
And so at the time we were considering this, there was contact around, was that going to be a real obstacle? You were optimistic that it would not be. And to date, I guess you're feeling that.
I'm optimistic. It will not be. I mean, certainly, buyers need to have the ability to be underwritten for a good mortgage product, right? At the end of the day. But there are a list of 10 lenders in Vermont who have expressed a willingness to lend in this space. Some are more favorable than others. Vermont Federal, East Rise, other sort of credit union type entities have expressed a great deal of support. So we'll further those relationships and connections, although we can't steer buyers to a particular product. We can certainly recommend that buyers visit certain finance institutions, and posted on our website is a list of institutions that we recommend that buyers talk to.
For those of us on transportation, we know that the agency had made a great effort to have contracts. They wanted to make sure that small Vermont businesses could access work, and they wouldn't be subject to Davis-Bacon, and so when we're talking about the AOT, were you using those contractors? They tended to be small Vermont businesses that would normally be available to do other types of work for the agency. Is that who you relied on to move as quickly as you did?
Those job order contracts are pre-contracts through the Agency of Transportation. And those are traditionally for the small maintenance repairs that the Agency of Transportation utilizes throughout the state. So we tapped into those contracts. So they are smaller contractors. And they're great. We are also onboarding, because of this initiative, other contractors that have asked to be on the list to be able to help do this infill project. They have expertise in working in mobile homes. So we're opened that up, and we've been expanding our job order contracts to be able to handle those contractors. So it is a win-win. And we're having lots of success utilizing our Vermont contractors. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, that was something those of us on transportation have been working on, lowering the bonding standards and so forth, and the barriers that were creating obstacles to have Vermont businesses do some of this work.
Two questions. One, I'm not thinking very clearly today. And so I have a memory that this was, we imagine this to be mostly private parks. Am I just remembering wrong? That's fine.
I can speak to that.
Sure, yeah.
Well, there was some initial questions about who we would be able to bring on board as part of this initiative. Right now, as it stands, we have private, public, and cooperative parks. And we have received inquiries from all different mechanisms and organizations. In fact, we just signed on for our next 40 lots that are coming line shortly from Addison Housing Works. We did a park owner agreement, determined lots, their eligibility, all within 2 weeks. And we had it fully executed and already have construction contracts.
Where? Madison County, where?
We have three parks, so it's a total of 7 lots. 2 in Virgins and 1 in Starksboro.
And then my other question was, it sounds like you all have gotten this amazing thing up and running, sort of brand new, really fast, which is great, like new website interface even. Is your staff time across agencies included in this here?
It's a very good question. The staff time from my department is relatively low, so we haven't, say, been billing to this program. But I'd say probably the task team itself would be relatively easy to track.
Yes.
And then a lot of the lift has been with Kathleen Schott with the Housing Authority.
Right, and we're certainly tracking that time.
Oh, yes, just one quick one. I'm just wondering if folks are being considered, I heard you say you're working with the home ownership centers, but are folks being considered from coordinated entry?
Certainly folks can be considered from coordinated entry. There's no prohibition. If folks come off from coordinated entry and otherwise are interested in applying to the program and are otherwise eligible, but we're not providing preference in any way to folks coming off coordinated entry.
I'm just curious why not? I mean, given once it's opened up to the public, I realize after the flood impacted, since those folks are housing insecure or homeless and there's a good chunk of those folks who have incomes, they're working.
It's a decision of the administration in rolling out the guidelines of the program. I will say that with the 12 applications that we've taken so far, we have had individuals attest to being homeless. And we're tracking that demographic within the applications that we're receiving. Not only are they displaced from flooding, but they're also indicating that they're homeless.
And we can discuss a preference for folks that are experiencing homelessness. I had it in my head that we added a preference.
So I can speak a little bit to that. We had pivoted away when we first tried to go out to put this program together. We found it a very a big leap from homelessness to home ownership and was having a gap. What we've decided is to track demographically to see, has anyone ever experienced homelessness? And so that we could bring that statistic back to see what's happening. There's no reason that someone couldn't be coming from coordinated entry, and they certainly do have the availability to go to the website. The qualification to register is to be pre-qualified through a financial institution. So if they're able to be pre-qualified through a financial lender, then there is absolutely no reason they couldn't register. It's all there and available.
I appreciate that, but if nobody is thinking about these people as potential applicants, then they're not going to be provided the assistance.
Well, the coordinated re-entry, in fact, should be aware of this resource.
They should be,
And
yeah.
helping make that connection.
So I just am trying to, I guess, dispel the fact that all people who are homeless don't have the ability to be homeowners. That's all.
I agree.
Absolutely.
That's very good. But I guess the question then becomes one of, you can have a website, but the extent to which information goes out to these teams in terms of, funding and initiatives that are being brought on over a period of time. It's very hard to keep it all straight, the names and whatever. And so I think that's the other thing is, if you've got staff out there working with these households, they need to have up-to-date information in terms of what is in that resource
If I could speak to that, certainly I will commit to ensuring that the coordinated entry providers are aware of this initiative and.
Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Yes.
One quick question, is there any obligation of the homeowner after they purchase the home, like shared equity or anything like that, or it's just getting them in the home is the public benefit?
It is getting them into the home. There are a couple requirements. It cannot be a second home. It must be a primary residence. And they must own it for 12 months. So they do have an obligation to live in the home as a primary resident for 1 year.
Then they could sell.
Correct.
Any other questions? Thank you. I realize now we'll go back to the correct order. And so we're back to number 3, and Jenny's here from VHCB. Gus was not available because of a family medical issue, and Holly is on maternity leave. So we're glad that you were able to join us today. And obviously, it's somewhat limited, so we really just need to get an update. Everybody here is pretty conversant in terms of, the program, et cetera. So if you could sort of give us the update from the work that you're doing, that would be great.
We can try to get through the slide deck very quickly. And
Usually people have more slides than we have time. That's our message here.
all right. So for the record, I'm Jenny Hislop. I'm the housing director for VHCB, and Emily Phillips, who's the deputy director, is here with me today supporting the process. So we're really happy to be here to provide an update on the impact of the state's housing investments, and as well as the pipeline of new projects, which I think is particularly important in this time. So the investments that have been made in Vermont's communities through VHCB's housing program since 2020 will impact more than 4,500 households. Many of those are most vulnerable neighbors. The $365 million that VHCB has committed to projects and programs has leveraged $630 million in private equity, federal funding, and other grants, and that's just since 2020.
So this is very helpful, because I was trying to, we do it, year by year or request by request, and we lose track of, and we only focus on, how much more there is to do, without going back and recognizing how much has really been accomplished. So over 4,500 since 2020 is obviously indicative of a lot of work, and so that's a very helpful slide.
Great, thank you. And so those results, just to sort of summarize, that's 92 affordable housing projects around the state that are in various phases of development, and I'll talk about some of them specifically. But 2,000 new units, 700 that are designated for people exiting homelessness. 24 shelter projects, of which 10 are just brand new shelters. Again, this is going back to 2020 in various stages of development. 4 recovery projects around the state that will serve the needs of 58 individuals at a time. In a couple of cases, also their children. Accessibility improvements for more than 350 disabled households around the state. Improved housing for 226 farm workers, and homeownership opportunities for more than 300 families. And that more than 150 of those are newly constructed, permanently affordable shared equity homes. And this slide also has a picture of Fox Run, which just broke ground in July. This is in Berlin's New Town Center. It's being developed by Down Street Housing in Evernorth, and there will be 6 units here that will meet the needs of households experiencing homelessness. So I just want to take a minute to talk about some of the current impact. I think that's something the committee is interested in hearing about, and what's active in the development pipeline around the state. On the left here, you see Copley Terrace. This is a 38-unit Section 8 project that serves elders and folks with disabilities. And this project was at very real risk being lost as an affordable housing option in the community when Evernorth stepped in to acquire it, with Down Street acting as the property manager. And on the right is Central and Main. This is a 25-unit project being developed by Wyndham Windsor. It has 25 units and it leveraged funds from the Upper Valley Loan Fund. So this is local employers coming together with us to put up low-cost capital to advance the housing project in their community. Next. And on this slide, the reason I love this slide is it's one slide, 3 projects, 99 new homes in these pictures. So Squire House in Bennington, it opened this summer. It offers recovery housing for 7 women and their children in a historic rehab.
I also like how the size and vibe of the 3 are very different. It helps see the scope of the work you do.
That's right, that's right. And then Kelly's Field in the middle, this is housing for elders in Heinsberg. It'll serve 24 households with 5 units that are designated for those experiencing homelessness. It's in downtown Heinsberg. It's in an area zone for increased density, and Cathedral Square is the developer here. And then you have 10th Cavalry on the right. This is a 65-unit historic rehab of 3 formerly vacant buildings. And it is expected to begin leasing within a few weeks. So very exciting. 11 households who have experienced homelessness will be served at minimum by this project. So looking forward, in the next couple of months, we're expecting 282 new rental homes will come online by February. 42 of those will be targeted to people experiencing homelessness. Looking a little bit further forward, we expect just about 1,000 new units to be ready for occupancy in fiscal year 25 and 26 combined. And because we continue to emphasize the need to serve households exiting homelessness, 222 of those will be targeted for that population.
The Quality Inn is being turned into affordable housing.
The Quality Inn, actually, it will be renamed the Speranza Inn because
That's Speranza?
Speranza, because in Italian that means hope.
Yes, I was gonna say that's Speranza.
Yeah, so
That's one of the answers to the riddles Torn got.
so
Like to know.
that name reflects obviously Barry's heritage, Italian heritage, but also a vision for a project that will serve 42 households, all of whom are experiencing homelessness. It will be initially operated, continue to be operated as a hotel, but with intensive services available to help people transition to permanent housing. And so we're continuing to work on meeting a really broad array of housing needs. Someone in this building recently referred to this as the Swiss Army knife approach, and we try to explore using every tool that there is to have maximum impact. And this project in Waterbury Marsh House is an example of that. It's mixed income housing, it's service enriched. It has 26 new units that will come online. 5 are set aside for people who are experiencing homelessness, and then 3 units are set aside for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Which is
under construction.
it is just about to be under construction. Yep, just barely.
Wow.
And so one of the themes that I think you've all heard about and we've heard about consistently as we've tried to focus on meeting the needs of the most vulnerable, of our most vulnerable neighbors, is this chronic unmet need for services. And so we grappled with that question and explored a bunch of partnerships to try to meet the need. And when those weren't fruitful, we engaged with a private philanthropist who has committed $3 million to VHCB. And we will use that funding, and we are using that funding to create 10 new resident service coordinator positions housed in our organizations around the state, and they will be funded for up to 3 years to provide service coordination and ensure the tenant stability and housing retention. So do you have a question?
Yeah, go ahead. What, are you gonna use this, are they gonna use a specific model?
Yeah.
Yes, we are in the process of, we've since May been working very intensely with the 10 organizations to design an approach that's evidence-based, that has fidelity of data measures. They're all committing to using the same software measuring, having the same interventions, measuring the output.
What happens after 3 years?
Well, the idea, this very generous philanthropist is hoping that throughout the 3 years, we will be able to generate enough good data to add to create a report and advocate for longer term permanent housing. The philanthropist has indicated that they can fund for up to 3 years, and they would like the network to use that to be able to.
So we could get flexibility in the general fund. Another question about that. So, I know that some of the housing partners that I've spoken with, feel that much more intensive services would actually help them lower costs, right? So I'm curious if that's gonna be part of what you're sort of testing. And then my other question related to that is, you've gotten so much great work done through your community partners, and I'm curious what you think is sort of preventing the system and people working there from being able to do more.
I lost the train of your first question, the intensive services.
If you're looking to like see a return on investment,
Yeah.
actually like within your portfolio.
That's a great
Services.
So these are not case management positions, these are coordinator positions. And the distinction there is that for some tenants, accessing those intensive services can be challenging, and there's turnover in service partnerships. So the role of this position is to do the advocacy with those community partners and get the intensive services, but not to provide it themselves. So one of the goals is that they'll help people navigate what can feel like a fractured system as a tenant.
And if they had a good quality case manager assigned, that exactly would be the activities that would be inherent in their job. Seriously, it's like a primary care.
I'm a former case manager myself, so you're speaking my language.
It's like a primary care physician is your medical home. Your case manager needs to be your
Yes.
service home and know the resources and how to bring them to bear. And
Assertive engagement is one of the core evidence-based practices that will be involved here and that all organizations have committed to. And basically what that means is the first time you knock on somebody's door, if they're not ready for you, that doesn't mean you go away forever. You might knock on their door next week.
or sitting in the office at 3:30, that usually.
Yes, exactly. So the idea is that each one of these coordinators will commit to assertive engagement and to trauma-informed care, really understanding the hurdles. And we will have a cohort of employees who will go through a training program together.
One thing I would really like to capture though in that coordination is how many of these individuals already have a case manager, or 2 or 3 in some cases. Seriously, I mean, because that's an investment of resources. The question is, are we, how are we getting the best benefit, or are we overlaying coordination
Right.
to compensate for something that is not working as well as it should underneath it?
Right. A great question. And I think one of the goals here is to avoid duplication of services, to be able, an environmental scan that's actually being completed as part of this in every region that talks about what's available for folks and how it's different in different regions so that people will have that to work with. Let's see.
We need to move.
Okay. So shelter investment, I think we can all agree that the ultimate fix for the housing crisis is more permanent housing. But until we can produce enough permanent housing, we've also continued to focus on expanding shelter capacity to meet short-term needs. So as part of that process, we consult with the Agency of Human Services to assess areas of high need. And when construction is complete, 9 communities will benefit from 10 new shelter developments in the communities that are listed on this slide deck. And I want to call out that one thing that has been successful in expediting shelter development is that the nonprofit housing developer network has stepped up to partner on the development of those facilities, often in partnership with the shelter operators. So you'll see Champlain Housing Trust, Down Street Housing, Rural Edge, they've all been real leaders in that. Mary Cohen down in Rutland, if it were up to her, there'd be a shelter by now. She's absolutely dedicated to doing that work, but without a service partner, it's been a real challenge. And we've also been really happy to partner with AHS on the funding that they spoke about earlier. where we've expedited the underwriting and development of the two St. Albans projects. So I think we're kind of short on time. We're going to skip. What I'll say about mobile home communities is that it continues to be an area of priority for us. And we've done 27 infill homes. And what you see here at Shattuck Hill is an age-restricted mobile home park in Newport, where we've provided two energy-efficient mobile homes for people experiencing homelessness. And one of the things about the pandemic and the spike in homelessness has really reinforced for us is the value of permanent affordability. So since 2021, in those portfolios around the state, 1,450 households experiencing homelessness have been housed in those portfolios, those permanently affordable portfolios. That's a lot of savings for the hotel voucher program, but more importantly, it's a dignified and good outcome for people experiencing homelessness. So I could talk all day about what we've done, but I think it's just as important to talk about what we have left to do. And so we have a very broad and active pipeline of projects that developers continue to bring to us. In hand right now, we have $29 million in funding requests. If we were to fund all of those by, or even most of those, that would deplete our resources for this year. We expect another $35 to $40 million in applications this fiscal year to keep housing more vulnerable Vermonters. And our ability to meet that need is really driven by Doug's analysis of how much ARPA will revert. So we could certainly use the $30 million, and we expect that we could bring another 300 units online with that funded.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Great, thank you. Sorry to rush you. A lot of good work. At least sometimes we don't put enough effort on what we've accomplished. So we'll go to General Assistance Emergency Housing Task Force. And I'm just looking at, we have a grant, it's going to be, we have to be finished by 5 minutes of 12. We started later, so we anticipated that we'd go a little bit later, but we have a grant request and the person has to leave at noon. So I just need to let you know what we have for time available. So thank you for being available. I don't know who wants to take the lead of your presentation. You, Jubilee, you got your hand up or?
No, I was just motioning. I think Sarah's going to start us off.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks for having us this morning. For the record, my name is Sarah Russell. I'm the Special Assistant to End Homelessness for the City of Burlington and one of the co-chairs of the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program Task Force. And we can definitely stay within this time frame this morning. So I'm going to start out with some updates for you all around the task force work. We have now met for 6 meetings. We have opted to extend our meeting lengths from 2 hours to 3 hours due to the limit on the number of meetings that we can have. And I'll talk a little bit more about our future process in just a minute for the rest of the remaining meetings. During the last few weeks, conversation has really geared toward nailing down our recommendations around eligibility criteria for folks who would need to access the motel program. At this point, we have conducted some straw polls and formal voting among committee members and are just waiting for clarification on additional protections related to domestic violence and ADA. We have consulted with both the network and VCIL to make sure that we, excuse me, have adequate protections in place for those two subpopulations. Once we have that, we should be in a fairly decent place of being able to make final recommendations for the report related to eligibility criteria. Discussion most recently has focused on program requirements related specifically to income contribution and development of a savings escrow. We have also talked about participant recommendations, and that's been a bit challenging. I think, as you heard earlier this morning, from Commissioner Winters, and Deputy Commissioner Gray around wait times for case management, related to our housing navigation, related to once folks are enrolled in coordinated entry. So we are working on trying to find the balance between participant recommendations within the program and recognizing provider capacity within the community. We hope at our next meeting to dive into the into shelter assessment in terms of identifying what our current capacity is and what our needed capacity is. I will just flag that the report that we were hoping to rely on, that was conducted in late May or early June, which I feel like was a really thorough report by the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, the Balance of State Continuum of Care, and the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont, that was dependent on being able to continue to maintain the motel capacity that we had at that time. We weren't able to anticipate the changes to the program related to FY25. So there will need to be some work dedicated to having that conversation in light of some of the changes that have taken place with folks in motel capacity this fall. We have also had some discussion around the adverse weather conditions. I think that what we've heard from communities across the state is concerns related to the lack of relaxed program eligibility for this season, and how that's going to impact our communities. At this time, we're seeing tremendous unsheltered homelessness. I can speak to Chittenden County. We have well over 350 people who are sleeping outside right now. I think that other regions across the state have seen that influx, and we're all certainly really anxious going into the cold weather season. So we have spent some time talking in depth, actually, at our last meeting around how we can ensure that folks have access to shelter stay during cold weather months. We have talked about unifying the role of the coordinated entry lead agency across the state, or at least ensuring that that's consistent, between regions. I think that I can speak to Chittenden County. What we see in Chittenden County does not sound like it's entirely consistent with the rest of the state. So I think that there's a desire among the task force. I know this was part of the directives that were given to us, that we need to ensure some level of consistency across the state related to coordinated entry. I will say that coordinated entry systems are will be challenged to find consistency if that is not linked to increased investment in capacity across the state. Lastly, I would say that we still need to dive a little deeper into period of ineligibility, and how that functions for folks within the program. As I said, we'll be talking more about the shelter assessment in our upcoming meeting, and additionally around coordinated entry and services. Speaking to the question that was asked of Commissioner Winters earlier this morning, in Chittenden County, we do have a very significant wait for folks to be connected to housing navigation. At this point, we have about a 6-month wait for folks to be connected due to lack of system capacity, workforce challenges, and funding. So we're seeing folks that are, unfortunately, were entered into the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program, met their max number of days, and were not able to be connected to case management during that time. So that's a huge challenge, especially once folks leave any kind of stable shelter situation. It makes it all the more challenging to be able to connect with them afterward, because their circumstances change. So we definitely need to consider the capacity of our system in relation to shelter stays. Our other pieces that I think that we still need to work toward discussion and making recommendations are related to reporting. By Department of Children and Families around this program. The data sharing is something that is critical to communities' work and being able to, really strive toward partnership. And we are unable to do that if, we don't have adequate data and reporting. So that is something that we need to focus on. In addition, I heard this morning, actually just, a few minutes ago from Emily, I think from VHCB around, case management services and duplication of service provision in general. And I think that it's a much broader discussion that needs to happen about how we can diversify our workforce and ensure that the skill sets of case management staff are broad enough to include housing. I think that by doing that, we are able to reduce duplication of services. We're able to reduce the number of different case managers that are engaged with households. Certainly, there's room within our system for specialized case management services. But I think this really leads towards one of the directives around identifying the role of the Agency of Human Services staff and its contractors in this work. Because if we diversify the skill set of case management staff across our system to include housing navigation, then we increase our workforce and also support professional development among our direct service staff. So that's a conversation I think that we need to dive a little bit deeper into. I think that actually, just in closing, I guess I would say from my part, I've given a ton of information in a short period of time, but our next meeting on November 19th, we have actually opted to have a sort of a full day retreat actually in person in Montpelier, where we can dive a little bit deeper into these issues. From that, on the 19th, we will be developing a final-ish report that will be shared broadly by December 3rd, which will allow for 7 days of review. And then our last meeting on December 10th will largely consist of public forum, collecting input from our communities, from our providers and people with lived experience who've had a chance to review the report, along with finalizing our recommendations. And I think Jubilee is going to talk a little bit about some of our challenges so far, and anything else that I've missed. I would just continue to stress that two of the challenges that, come up for me are the, lack of time that we have to meet to have these really critical conversations. 8 meetings was just didn't set us up for success necessarily. And I think that being able to diversify the voices in the room and being limited in who could participate in this task force has been a challenge. And the last thing I would say is that I think that, it's been difficult to collect feedback from providers and have them be really truly engaged in our public forum portion of the task force, because they are responding, in such an emergent manner to the program changes that took place this fall, as you heard earlier this morning. So with that, I will pass over to Jubilee, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I guess I would say certainly the future of and the work of the task force and the continuation, I think, can be added to a sort of the to-do list for when we come back, which isn't that far, because obviously there's a lot more to be done. But just the nature of the work, the areas of information you're getting, the recommendations. The task force has really been doing a wonderful job, and you've done a great job of sort of presenting the work and the thoughtfulness that you've approached this daunting task. So just want to thank you both and all the members of the task force for their efforts to help us try to do the best and make the best decisions possible. So with that, Jubilee, I'll let you go to your comments as well.
Yeah, no, Sarah did the bulk of the presenting, and really kind of highlighted, I think our biggest challenge has been that coupling of having very few meetings, that were, authorized for the task force, and then just the people, who are part of the discussion are all, really, really busy right now. And when you're doing this type of work, it's like, how do you parcel out your time? So that's been really challenging. We did have, we were happy to have Sean Gilpin, join us for this last meeting, but that's, not having, the housing folks there from the administration, was challenging. And unfortunate, we haven't been able to talk about some of those bigger picture ideas on, how can we make it streamline the process of, developing more affordable housing and shelter expansion. I think, timing, our other kind of really big issue we're grappling now is we're really trying to make decisions as we kind of have this circular loop of folks not wanting to, vote on an opinion, until they see the big picture. But it's been really hard to get to a big picture without people, voting yes or no. So we're seeing a lot of abstentions, which is, it's hard to move forward. But we're figuring it out. I think I'm really excited for the full day retreat, where, we'll have most of us at least in the room. That's another challenge, is a lot of folks are needed, at their other roles. And so making time to travel to Montpelier, or Waterbury, for the meeting has been difficult. So I'm hopeful about our next meeting. It's going to be long, and largely in person. And I think we'll have, be able to have deeper discussion and really, hone in on our final recommendations.
Thank you. Any comments? Well, we look forward to your report, and thank you for the work. In some ways, having a finite number of meetings is good in terms of people. Obviously, I know I do work a lot better when I'm working against a deadline or against a limit, and so much of what we need to do it's really time sensitive in terms of what's in the best interests of Vermonters, and also how effectively we're using resources within the system, what we can do to actually develop more capacity, where and how. And to me, that's really important work to have the benefit of your thinking and experience. So I'm looking around the room. This is more of an update at this point, and then once we get the report, I think that will be helpful for the committee work in January. And so thank you very much, Sarah and Jubilee. And I'm looking at the clock, and we have 7 minutes before noon, so we're doing well. So good luck with your all-day session. Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
So I am going to go out of order again. I realize, Joan, you're kind of in the waiting room, and you're going to have to wait a minute or two because we need to take up a grant request number 3224. Because Ashley Berlin has a hard stop at noon. So, Ash, is she on?
She's not.
Okay. Oh. Maybe she's outside. Okay. So. Sorry about that, Joan. Are you still in the waiting room? Or, yeah, you're still there.
I'm still here.
If we don't find Ashley, then we'll go back to our scheduled agenda, which you would be next, and then we'll go to the grant request. So why don't, I imagine you're, find anybody? All right, we'll have you start, Joan. If Ashley should show up, we'll have to just take a break and then come back.
Okay. Well, I hopefully you've received the one-page memo that reviews the BGAP, that's the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program, started in August 29th.
Yeah.
Since then,
Mhm.
we've had 183 applications submitted. In total, that represented $30.5 million worth of net damages, and the award total, if we funded all of those, would be 4.4. Of those, 72 applications were from the ag community, and the data collected from them amounted to 8.4 million. The estimated award would be 1.9. So we've awarded about a little over a quarter of the applications that have come in. Next week is the deadline for new applications, but we still have quite a lot to go through in terms of making sure that they're complete. So the rest are in various stages of either documentation is missing or a particular form is missing, but we have every intention to go through each of them and give them an ample opportunity to submit their corrected applications.
Oh, that's helpful. So if somebody doesn't have something, it's not that they're denied, they're given assistance to what they need.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
It's just that for new applications, we will close it next week.
Yes, Representative Klein, whoever you are.
I really don't. What size are the awards?
Oh, they're all over the lot. I don't
Can
have
you give
an
me like a
average
median or
worked
something?
out. Not necessarily. There are some awards. I mean, the maximum could be $100,000. That's the max. Most of the ones I've approved look to be much, much less than that. There are some
Much
really
less, like
small ones.
5,000?
Sorry?
What does much less mean to you? 10?
I mean, 50, 40, 10. There's some very small grants. It's all over the lot. So I don't have that worked out, like what the median was.
Okay, I'd love to see that at some point. Thank you.
Great.
It is, we were concerned obviously about the agricultural sector, and so that's very helpful to have the data on that particular universe of applicants. Other questions of Joan? So November 15th is the end. Get your application in. If something's missing, you'll still have an opportunity to correct it. And you estimate that you will finish your decision-making process by the end of December, or?
I'm hoping that would be the case, so that it would be wrapped up, so we'll know if there's any residual and come up with some sort of idea, proposal on how to make a sort of sustainable disaster relief fund, if you will.
Other questions or comments from? So far things are going smoothly, and well, you're pretty used to this at this point.
Unfortunately, yes.
In terms of getting applications, evaluating them, and rating them, and getting the money out in a very timely way. Any other comments or questions? So we look forward to kind of the final number of applications after November 15th, and what the awards, and then some sense of the range. If we could do it in brackets, X number, and
Sure.
use bracket and so forth. I think that would be very helpful. For people.
Yeah, indeed.
All right. Thank you very much, Joan.
All right. Thank you.
We're
Bye-bye.
still looking for Ashley.
She's on Zoom.
She's on Zoom. Okay. So now we're also going out of order again, and we're going to move to a grant request. It's JFO number 3224. It's $500,000, and we have Ashley Berlin, who's here from the Agency of Human Services to present the request. And we know you have a hard stop at noon, so I'd like to present the request, and then we'll do an action item. Thank you, Ashley.
Okay, and I apologize because this somehow fell off my calendar and my whole day has gotten turned around and I don't have a hard stop at noon anymore. So given that it's 1 minute.
Well, I'm not going to put you back in order. We'll let you go.
Okay. For the record, I'm Ashley Berliner. I'm the Director of Medicaid Policy for the state of Vermont. And I'm here today to talk to you about a grant that AHS applied for in partnership with the Agency of Education. It is a 3-year grant with a total of $2.5 million. We have $500,000 in the first year. And the goal is to expand access to care, improve administrative efficiencies, and pull in and maximize the federal financial participation in our school-based health services program. We have contracted with the University of Massachusetts, who is kind of considered the gold standard in terms of administrative claiming and school-based health services financial participation, and are doing a evaluation of best practices across the country to think about how we can expand access and implement this change in the state of Vermont.
Okay, Representative Shaw.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for presenting this. I see that the positions, 2 limited service positions, they are funded through June 30th of 2025. So it's through the end of this fiscal year, this grant is going to cover. Is that correct?
The grant is actually a 3-year grant. The way that the grant came in, they're only providing 1 year at a time of funding. So the expectation is that we would have that position now for about 2.5 years.
So they're going to approve it each year. They're approving this each year of the 3 years.
I am very much not an expert on your committee's process for approving.
Not us, not us. You said that it's being approved by the feds each year.
No, the feds, sorry, I misspoke. The feds approved it for 3 years, but they're only releasing funding 1 year at a time.
Yeah, well, that's pretty standard.
Yes. So they
don't want you to hold your money,
Yeah.
like interest on it for 2 years.
right, but so really that's not the right date then, is what I'm hearing.
That's,
It really goes through 6/30 of
well,
2027.
they're funded for the lifetime of the grant.
Yes.
Really, what we're.
Right, which is not 2025, but 2027.
Correct.
Okay, so that should be changed then maybe.
Yes.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about how these positions, and it's okay if we need to follow up later, that's okay, are like very explicitly going to work with school districts in order to perhaps draw down more Medicaid funds to school districts, or offset costs of services that are already being provided at the school district level?
Yeah.
Like, I just want to know the integration mechanism. Thank you.
There are a couple of ways that we think we can pull in additional funding, and we really need the state resources to help achieve that. So that's what these positions are for. One would sit on my team on the policy side. We have state plan amendments that need to be written, policy documents that need to be written, negotiations with CMS around what our program looks like once we establish a methodology and start heading in that direction. On the AOE side, we really need a lot of close stakeholder engagement with the schools to understand how things are working on the ground and what is possible moving forward. So one of the main ways we think we can bring in more money, and I'm really optimistic on this point, is by claiming for things that schools are already doing that they're not getting Medicaid reimbursement for today. And I'm sure you're aware that our IT system in the schools, similar to our Medicaid IT systems, while in the schools, it doesn't exist. Everything is paper-based. And so we just have a lot of inefficiencies in how we are billing Medicaid. It's underbilled. A lot of schools don't even bother with billing for certain services because the burden is so high. And so using these positions to really get in there and understand the processes, understand barriers, and help figure out a path forward that is realistic and works in the flow of these school systems is how we think we can move forward in a successful way.
Thank you. I'd love to have an even with more minutes conversation about sort of really specifically what you imagine workflows would look like and how many dollars you're hoping we would be able to draw down.
Yeah.
We're drawing down quite a few now through Success Beyond 6. How that's done, though, I think it varies. And then the other area is mental health services, behavior interventionists that are done through the community mental health delivery system. But some schools have opted to hire their own clinical staff. And so it really is a hodgepodge at this point. And I know that that in some schools that staff now has just fallen, and that's been one of the complaints, it's fallen to the ed fund. So the nice thing is bringing healthcare services to where the kids are, which is schools. But the question is, what is the delivery and where does the payment flow, and making sure that we're getting the maximum use of Medicaid. So I think this is really important work and long overdue. And I think it also could afford perhaps a better coordinated approach for the care. And also, particularly in the mental health world, these kids are coming with families, and sometimes the families, it's not just the student, it's actually, so you could have a more comprehensive approach. So good luck. Other comments or
I'm
questions?
just hearing that the cost and the just strain of the mental health issues on teachers in schools is probably the number one problem we're hearing in the commission on the future of public education.
Well, I can believe that.
As a substitute, I'm seeing it every
day.
And they can't get substitutes.
Right, and that's why.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, so getting back to the grant request, we are obviously, it's led us to a larger discussion of the work and the importance of the work. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept the grant? Senator Cummings has made a motion. Do you want to cite do you have your?
Do I have a sheet?
Yes, you do.
Do you have a sheet?
Very handy.
Somewhere in my pile. I have a sheet.
Right here. It's a motion on 3224.
Right, number 4.
Number 4.
224. Okay. Ian Cummings, move to accept a grant of $500,000 to the Vermont Agency of Human Services Central Office from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Medicare and Medicaid for the modernization and expansion of Medicaid and CHIPS, school-based services, and to approve 2 limited service positions, 1 position in AHS, Healthcare Assistant Administrator 2, and 1 position to the Agency of Education, I think, Education Medicaid Specialist. I'll go find my cheat sheet.
So we have the motion, a second, please. Senator Birchwood. Okay, any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll call the roll.
It was difficult for me to transcribe all that, but I think.
Oh, you have it right here.
I moved approval.
Okay.
You can just take it.
It's all written somewhere.
Senator Baruch,
Yes.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
Representative Harrison, yes. Representative Lamford,
Yes.
Senator Perchlik,
Yes.
Representative Schy,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Representative Wood,
Yes.
Representative Kornheiser.
Yeah.
And Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Vote is 10-0.
Yes. Okay, nice. Thank you very much, Ashley. Now we'll go back to the top of the list, and we have grant number 3221. It's $1 million grant. I see we have folks from the judiciary to present the request. No cookies?
No
Terry?
cookies, that's what I was just saying. It's only if we approve the grant, we get cookies.
No soup for you.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay.
I just.
You keep your options open.
Love me the day that you don't have cookies.
We know even your container by heart, because we recognize it right off. She's hiding.
Yeah.
You can have a donut in exchange.
Yes.
Yes, they're right there.
So with that, we look forward to your request for $1 million. Oh.
welcome. Thank you, Madam Chair, Senators, Representatives, my name is Terry Person, State Administrator. Those look like Jones donuts.
They are, yeah.
It's the best. And this is Scott Griffith, who's our Chief of the Planning and Court Services Division of the Judiciary. We're actually here to request two grant acceptances, one for $1 million and one for $2.5 million, each associated with our adult treatment dockets. And Scott, you'll give a brief overview of each if that would be helpful for you.
I'm sorry, I realized that. What? Oh, okay. All right, I've got to go rejigger the agenda after you finish. Please skip somebody. On the agenda. No, please continue and we'll go back to the other.
Okay, we're here to respectfully request the acceptance of two grants. One is for $1 million and the other is $2.5 million, each is associated with our adult treatment dockets. And Scott, who is the Chief of Planning and Court Services, oversees our treatment dockets, and he will provide a brief overview of the two specific grants. They're Bureau of Justice Assistance grants.
Good afternoon, Scott Griffith, Chief of Planning and Court Services in the Court Administrator's Office. Just for context, we've got 7 treatment dockets in the judiciary. 7 are for adults and 1 is a family treatment docket. That's our newest treatment docket, and that's in Chittenden County. As Terry mentioned, the grants and the work of the treatment dockets are administered within the Planning and Court Services Division, but our governance structure is one that has the involvement of our State Court Administrator, our Chief Superior Judge, Tom Zone, and Associate Justice Nancy Waples. That group, along with Superior Court Judge Kevin Griffin, constitutes our Executive Oversight Committee. And so staff report regularly to the Executive Oversight Committee and to the Supreme Court on what's happening with the treatment dockets. At the local level, of course, we have these programs. These programs are collaborative programs that require the involvement of state's attorneys, defenders, treatment providers, and other community service providers. Vermont has been in the business of offering these programs, the judiciary, for over 20 years. So those of you here today who have been on the committee or have been around for a while, our request to have this body accept grants is not new. Generally, our treatment dockets are funded with federal grants, multi-year, multi-million-dollar federal grants. And what we're asking for today is acceptance of 2 grants, separate grants, both from the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance. We've gotten funds from that source many times over the years. The first one is a smaller grant for $1 million. And this grant will allow us to expand services that are provided in the southeast region of the state. We have a DUI treatment docket in Windham, Windsor, and Orange counties. And we'd like to expand the docket there to include an adult drug court track. That's at the request of the local folks there. And this money will allow us to cover the costs of treatment, case management, and other services that are central to the docket.
Just a moment, we have a question.
I just want to say on behalf of Windham County, I've been in office for 6 years, and this is something we've been desperately seeking for at least those 6 years. And I think before, I just want to say thank you for all of your work to make this happen and to find the funding for it. And we're really excited about this collaboration. Thank you very, very much.
And I can see and feel Senator Sears behind me because he talked about the disparities that existed from region to region in terms of what you had for resources and ability to respond. So the whole issue is applying for the grants and continuing to, because at the end of the grants, what is the capacity to pick this up or the extent to which some of this gets integrated in part how you do business anyway. But if the grants don't flow at some point, that can pose some tough decisions as well.
These are, I believe, both 4-year grants.
That's right.
That's correct.
4 years?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, Senator Booth.
I don't know if the chair would entertain a motion.
I think so. Do you want to do the first one?
Sure.
Okay. $1 million, or do you want to go for the big one?
Can I combine them in a motion?
Well, no.
you're not.
Two separate grants. They're two separate grants.
Okay. I was gonna do
They
a
are
consent
long.
motion for the whole page. So I would move that we accept a grant of 1 million to the Vermont Judiciary from the U.S. Department of Justice to sustain Southeast Regional DUI treatment docket and develop a separate drug court track for non-DUI offenders.
Your second to the motion? Representative Wood, any further discussion? This is on 3221, $1 million. If not, call the roll.
Okay, Senator Baruth,
Yes.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
Representative Harrison, yes. Representative Lamford,
Yes.
Senator Perchley.
Yes.
Representative Shy,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Representative Wood,
Yes.
Representative Kornheiser,
Yes.
and Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
10-0-0. What kind of cookies did you bring?
Well, we haven't approved the second.
The second one. I want to know before the second one.
One more grant to go. Well, you.
Might change his vote on the second night.
But you sort of combine in your presentation. Do you have anything more that you want to add specifically about 3222?
The larger, only, Senator, that the larger grant will be dedicated to work done in all of the treatment, all of the adult treatment dockets to promote accountability, promote performance, implement a certification protocol for all of the dockets, something that we've been wanting to do for a while and are happy to have the opportunity to move forward.
So I just have one question. Obviously, the court backlog and your workload and your implementation of a new IT system and so forth. And now, I mean, obviously, this represents more sort of systems work and so forth. How are we doing in terms of, I've heard from people working in the court system that there's been a great effort to get caught up. And I just wondered if are we making progress?
Yes.
And because this represents quite a bit of work for people.
Right. Well, Madam Chair, the 2.5 million grant is basically for a continuation of the treatment dockets that are currently in effect in Rutland, in Chittenden, in Washington counties. So it's a continuation of what's been in effect.
And so that it would expand the infrastructure by adopting quality assurance and so forth. That's what I was really referring to.
Right. And the other one, the 1.5, is an expansion of the DUI treatment court that's in Windsor, Wyndham, and Orange to allow for drug treatment in conjunction with the DUI for an individual who has both, for example. And I wanted to mention one of the 3 judge positions that was given last session is for a dedicated treatment court judge, and that's Judge Barry Griffin, who is basically then serving in all of the treatment courts. And that helps because otherwise we had to move someone from the criminal docket to do the treatment court docket one day every other week. This frees those judges up to do their regular docket work, cover more cases, and part of this approach is to have a consistent, dedicated treatment court judge, and that's Judge Griffin. So that's been extremely helpful. We are making progress, and the independent network has certainly alleviated a lot of the delays that were occasioned when we had the breakdowns. We haven't had any of those. So it's been really helpful to be able to have a continuum. And the additional judges have been extremely helpful as well. So we're definitely making progress. It didn't happen overnight, so I can't say, yes, we've cleared everything up, but we're making very good progress. Thanks. We're so grateful for the additional judge positions and the independent network.
Thank you for the update. It's good to get some positive. Other questions about this other grant? If not, would someone like to make a motion? Representative Shaw?
I move to accept a grant of $2.5 million to the Vermont Judiciary from the U.S. Department of Justice to sustain and expand infrastructure improvements for the state's treatment dockets.
Second. Senator Cummings is second. Any further discussion? Not, we'll call the roll.
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
Representative Harrison, yes. Representative Lamford,
Yes.
Senator Perchley.
Yes.
Representative Shy,
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Representative Wood,
Yes.
Representative Kornheiser,
Yes.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
and the vote is 10-0-0.
Thank you. Good to see you and good to get the positive news on how things are going on the workload. So thank you so much for your interest. I regret that I have skipped over one witness, and that was program updates, and we had Melissa Bailey, who is, I think, oh, okay, who has been very patient and didn't wave her hand. And so I'm going to go back to the 1120 item, and this is an update from the Department of Public Service. So thank you, and I apologize, Melissa, for skipping over and having you wait so long. But I see that there's someone in a uniform who's waited even longer. So it's your first thing. So, all right. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. Melissa Bailey, Director of the State Energy Office with the Department of Public Service here on behalf of provide a quick update on the financial assistance program for flood impacted Vermonters that was launched in September of 2023 and then expanded in August of this year to include folks impacted by the floods in 2024, providing up to $10,000 per household for replacing heating equipment and appliances.
We did find out that you answered our question about if the retroactivity. So that was, thank you for doing that.
Sure, no problem. Yep, great. And so we continue to see uptake of the program as noted in the written memo. 379 low and moderate income households have been served to date as of October 31st. 572 appliances, heating systems, and water heaters have been replaced, and just over 2.2 million dispersed in incentives. The total spending on the grant is slightly higher when you include the administrative costs, but still under about $3 million. We received quarterly updates from Efficiency Vermont on the program. They advise there's still a pipeline of projects. We expect to see spending flow over into 2025. A lot of these projects have kind of a long tail, long timeline to complete. And Efficiency Vermont is still doing outreach and publicizing the availability of funds and working with local recovery teams. And again, they expect to see projects continue into next year. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Melissa? Thank you.
Hanging in there.
Thank you for hanging in there. So now we will go back and we are now up to grant number 3223 to the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire Safety. I think we did this to poor Michael DeRushy last time. He had 50,000 and he was last of the list. It was painful for the small grant that he was asking for. So, so I will turn it over to you. Thank you. And we will have a discussion. This is really for the position, for a position request.
Good morning. My name is Pat McLaughlin, for the record, and I'm the chief for the Vermont State Hazardous Materials Response Team, the Tier 2 program manager and support for the local LEPC that's focused on local emergency response commission. So it is detailed at the EPCRA ruling to do hazardous materials planning and response for local fire departments and emergency entities. Somewhat similar to the REMCs that VEM does, but LEPC is focused on hazmat.
Regional Emergency Management.
Yes.
Thank you.
And too many acronyms.
I hear you, yeah. Acronyms are somewhat painful in this line of work.
So let me ask, is this, it doesn't say on the description, or maybe it does, it's funded under a grant that we've already approved.
So we've had this grant in place for 20+ years. It is a
That's longer than me.
It's closer longer than me.
Longer than I, from that, correct?
When doing the research, we couldn't really find when we originally started getting this grant. It's through the DOT at their hazardous materials and pipeline emergency response. This grant does two things. It has a planning section, and that's where we're going to look at putting some funding for this position, and it has a response section. And that's where Director Droscher and the Fire Academy that Chief Scazza used to train all of our local firefighters in hazardous materials response. So this grant does two different things, and this time we're looking at the planning side of this grant.
So we've had it for 20 years, but we're just asking for a
So
position.
we're transitioning. So we've been doing a lot of contracting, and we've been doing a lot of work at VEN, had this portion of the grant up until the LEPC redistricting that happened in 2021. And that funding then was, that responsibility for LEPC was then transferred from BEM to the hazmat team in my one person.
But no position.
But I did not have a position, no. And so
You got the work, but no.
it was a third full-time job on top of this. And so worked to reallocate, reapply for the grants and get that position moving forward. So we're finishing up year 2 of the 3-year grant and working we'll be reapplying for it for another 3 years and 2026. So it's been a very secure grant, been a very reoccurring grant. And its work will be mitigating hazmats, planning and working specifically with all the local fire departments to do training, to get them understanding what the hazardous chemicals are stored within their communities, which is part of the Tier 2 program, that all chemicals storage throughout the state have to report to the State Emergency Response Commission, the LEPC.
If you're transporting a hazardous, is there any notification?
So for transporting, so we've done a little bit of work. We work incredulously with the Vermont rail system on the railroads and working towards getting better notification on what's transporting. Daily notification of what's being transported over the road is not, but Tier 2 does require the entities that are receiving those chemicals to tell us how those chemicals get to their facility. So if you have an EHS, an extremely hazardous substance that is coming to your facility to do ABC product, in your Tier 2 submission, you have to tell us from the border of Vermont to that facility how it gets there. So we can do commodity flow studies like we did in 2008 to see how hazardous 2018, sorry, how hazardous chemicals are transported across Vermont. So, and that isn't one of the goals of this position, is to update that commodity flow study to see where those hazardous materials are coming and going, and then focusing on the training for those communities that see the largest risk. Our transportation emergencies continue to be our #1 response bracket. We did over 50 out the door responses over the last 2 years to transportation emergencies, with the largest being the Irisburg incident last year, where we lost a tank.
Okay.
Yeah, but no one got hurt. And so that was a very good response at the end of the day.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to understand, you have an existing grant.
Yes.
We don't have a position. So if we have used the position to pay for it out of the grant, what are we foregoing?
We're right now, the last 2 years, because of the re-coalition, we're just rolling that money over because I don't have the capacity to get a contract. The last contract we went out to bid, it came back more than what the grant was. We couldn't do that contract. So this cycle, this 3-year cycle, has actually just been rolling over the funding into the 3rd year.
You're not diverting it from somewhere else.
No, it's just not getting spent.
Okay.
And so I would hate to send it back to Uncle Sam unspent. So I want to spend it.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I'll move item number 3, which is 3223. And I move to approve one limited service position to the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire Safety, entitled Hazmat Material Compliance Coordinator.
All right, do we have a second? Okay, we have Harrison. Any other discussion or questions? Call the roll.
Senator Baru.
Yes.
Senator Cummings. Representative Harrison, yes. Representative Lampley.
Yes.
Senator Perkley.
Yes.
Representative Shy.
Yes.
Senator Wesson.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Cornhider.
Yes.
And Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
And the vote again is 10-0-0. We're on a roll.
Madam Chair, thank you very much, and Representatives and Senators, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience.
Oh, no, I did not. Something about 35,000 pounds.
Last week, she wants to know if that's hazardous.
You want it to be. All right, now we have a number of grants here, that are from the Agency of Natural Resources. And I would begin by saying these are very, unique, please sit down, in that they represent, a retroactive acceptance, due to staffing turnover at the agency. It was discovered that they had not gone through the approval process. Obviously, we're very concerned about removing approval in this form because in no way today, understanding the basis for why you're asking for it, should it be interpreted by anyone in the administration that this is going to be standard practice. Because basically, we've been spending money without the acceptance of the grant. And the motions you will notice are made retroactive. So in case there is in fact an audit of the federal audit of the grants, there's no issue that money was spent from the grants without the required approval. So it's with those kind of introductory remarks, I'm just saying this is very much a unique case. Anybody who's here from the administration, please take note that this is not going to be a standard or an acceptable practice. This was something that was very much inadvertent, and you will notice on the motions, they all reference a retroactive date with the very purpose that I've talked about. So why don't we start, and are you doing all of them?
I am doing all of them, yes.
All right, so why don't we start with 3225, which is the 750,000.
So for the record, I'm Ansley Blomer. I'm the Director of Finance and Administration for Forest Parks and Recreation. And I just wanted to start off by saying, I think you spoke to this, but when I was reconciling our schedule of federal awards, our seasonal report this year, I discovered that there were 4 awards that had not been properly reported. And there was not an A1 form to correspond to those 4 awards. During the 2 years that these awards were executed, FPR was without a grants manager for extended periods of times, and we had the position turnover twice. So we clearly missed the necessary checks and balances on these, and they weren't in place, and the statutory stuff was missed. We do now have a good plan in place to ensure that we're in compliance going forward. You'll actually see a number of AA1s coming your way soon on awards that are in the works currently. So I'll walk through all 4 of the different awards. The first, 3225, is a U.S. Forest.
We're going to have to vote on all of them separately, though.
You want me to stop after the first?
Why don't you do the first and then because each one comes with a different date.
Yes, absolutely. The first award, 3225, is a U.S. Forest Service Inflation Reduction Act award in the amount of $750,000, which is to be used by the Urban Community Forest Program to broaden the access and benefits of healthy urban tree canopies in disadvantaged communities statewide through a competitive subrecipient grant program. The award also supports urban community forest staff to administer the grants. There is no match for this grant, and the award was originally signed on September 25th, 2023. It's a 5-year award. Any questions?
Any questions?
I will share this is the only award that has, we'll call it significant spending. In FY24, $10,000 was spent out of this program, but no other federal funds have been expended.
Do I have a motion to accept and step right up? Senator Burr.
Yeah, I would move to accept the grant of $750,000 to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Forests, Parks and Recreation from the U.S. Forest Service to increase access to wild areas for all Vermonters, especially traditionally underserved populations, with the approval retroactive to September 25, 2023.
Second, please.
Second.
Okay, Cummings.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So will these, I see traditionally underserved populations, so in my head, that includes, sort of a bunch of people. The in particular question for me is, will this increase resources at some of our state parks for people with physical disabilities?
Not specifically at our state parks. There are 4 subrecipients out in the communities, not within any of our property or land. There are a bunch of efforts actually currently happening for EDA work on state parks, but this is not for state parks, it's for communities.
Communities, so to go out, so communities apply for these funds, is that
That's
the deal?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, call the roll.
Senator Baruch,
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Representative Harrison, yes. Representative Blanford,
Yes.
Senator Perchley.
Yeah.
Representative Shy,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Representative Wood,
Yes.
Representative Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
vote 10-0-0.
Thank you. So we'll move on to 3226, and that's a 400,000.
Yes, so this is an U.S. Forest Service award for about $400,000, which is to be used to provide financial incentives for the maintenance and installation of advanced wood heating systems in Vermont schools and provide assistance to support a viable, efficient sawmill in the Northeast Kingdom that has recently experienced equipment losses that have impacted its operations and reduced its ability to maintain and expand markets for Vermont forest products. This grant requires a 100% match, and the match is comprised of roughly $9,000 from staff time, and the rest of the match is a 1-to-1 match for the grantees. So we pay $2,500 or $25,000, they pay $25,000. This award was originally signed on February 9th, 2004, and this is also a 5-year award.
Question?
You go first. You go first.
I'll go. Go ahead.
Can you say that again? How much are schools putting in on this?
It's 1-to-1. So if they put in, I think there's like $25,000 cap. And if we put in 25,000, they'd also be putting in 25,000.
And then the feds are matching the sum of your.
That's correct. That's correct.
Representative Shaw?
Yes, thank you. I guess I sort of thought we'd moved on from advanced wood heating systems. So I'm sort of looking
Oh,
to.
no.
We actually get a tax
Think
credit for
this
them.
is.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we still think this is an okay thing to be doing. Okay.
Or should, Senator Pritchett.
Yeah. Okay, and how many schools are involved in this?
So we have not, we don't have all of our subrecipient commitments yet. There's one sawmill that's $100,000 of this, $100,000 of this award. So just roughly doing the math, it could be anywhere upwards of, I think, 15 schools, but they have not all been committed yet.
And how much have you spent already in this grant?
I think $426.
Okay, thank you.
426.
And 31 cents.
All right. Other questions? Oh, Senator
I'm
Perchley.
ready to move it, but I think there'll be a new grant coming.
There is another award,
Same.
same program, exactly. Yep. Another, I believe it's same amount.
So we have more time to talk about advanced wood heating at the next meeting.
I know that you could help us with that. And I also know that we had a number of schools that installed them and then they couldn't get the parts for a while and now, so maintenance is really an issue as well. So,
I'm willing to move this.
you would, okay. Would you like to read your motion?
I would. I move to accept the JFO grant 3226 and to accept the grant of 400,000 to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation from the U.S. Forest Service to incentivize installation and maintenance of advanced wood heating systems in Vermont schools. And this motion is approval for retroactive to February 9th, 2024.
Second? Second, Senator Burris?
Okay.
You've got him already?
What, for a second?
Yes.
I don't, Aaron worries about the
Oh,
seconds, I don't.
You don't know, sorry. You just care about the minutes.
You gotta check this little box.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, now the clerk will call a roll.
Senator Baruch,
Yes.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
Representative Harrison, yeah. Representative Blanford,
Yes.
Senator Perchley,
Yes.
Representative Shy,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Representative Wood,
Yes.
Representative Kornheiser,
Yes.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
10-0-0.
Right, so
Really good at
we're
this,
getting toward the end, 3227, and that's $141,633. So we'll move to that one.
Thank you. This is another U.S. Forest Service award for the State Cooperative Fire Assistance Program with bipartisan infrastructure law funding in the amount of $141,633. Strange number. These funds will be utilized specifically for firefighter training with the goal of increasing the number of qualified wildland firefighters in the state of Vermont. The focus will be on state resources, but there will also be opportunities to provide trainings to towns and municipalities as well, providing regional partners with resources as well. There is no match for this award. This award was originally signed on February 7th, 2023, and it's also a 5-year award.
Questions on that? Obviously, with the wildfires we've been seeing in the region, yeah.
We might have flood, we might have a drought next.
Thanks, Sam. Actually, there was was it in Ludlow? Maybe?
Yeah, there was a forest fire.
Yeah,
We were told to not even barbecue.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
Unless there are further questions, I'll take a motion. Senator Birchley, it's been a long night. Whoever you are.
Oh, yeah. I move to accept grant number 3227 of $141,633 to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation from the U.S. Forest Service to support wildlife suppression training to state forest agency employees. A portion of the fund supports an existing limited service position, a wildland fire specialist. This approval is retroactive to February 7th, 2020.
Okay, Senator Cummings. Further questions or comments? Call the roll then.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Representative Harrison, yes. Representative Blanford.
Yes.
Senator Birchley.
Yes.
Representative Shy.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Yes.
Representative Kornheike.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
And once again, we have 10-0-0.
So we're down to the last request. It's 3228 and it's 50,000. Also to A&R. So Ash Ansley, if you want to give us this presentation.
Sure. Last one. U.S. Forest, it's a U.S. Forest award as well for 50,000 for Community Wildfire Defense Grant Program. The goals of this program are to increase our understanding of communities at risk to wildland fire in Vermont, build resources to help reduce potential wildfire risk in communities, and the development or revision of community wildfire protection plans. This grant requires a 10% state match, which is baked into our budget. And this award was originally signed on February 7th, 2023. This is also a 5-year award.
Comments or questions?
Question. So assuming when the feds mention tribes, it only means federally recognized tribes.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I would assume so, but that is an assumption.
Other questions or comment? Someone want to make a motion?
I guess, sorry, is that, can you look into that assumption?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Happy to do a third one.
All right. Beat me to it.
I move we accept JFO grant number 3228, a grant in the sum of $50,000 to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation from the U.S. Forest Service to aid at-risk local communities and tribes in reducing the risk of wildfires. This approval is retroactive to February 7th, 2023, if approved.
You're riffing off of her.
We're adding to the script.
Yes.
Can I have a second? Senator Baruch. Other comments or questions? Okay, we'll call the roll.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Representative Harrison, yes. Representative Blanford.
Yes.
Senator Birchley.
Yes.
Representative Shy.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Representative Wood.
Sure.
Do you have a box for that?
Representative Cornell,
Yeah.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
10-0-0.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, so we're a little bit behind, but that's to be expected. So we're now to the fiscal ops report. We have Catherine. Thank you. I'm Catherine Benham, Fiscal Office, and you all have a fiscal office report. I'm not going to go through it all, but I'd like to mention a few items on it. One is I'd like to remind everybody that there's an all-member briefing December 4th. And there'll be a presentation then about, Tom Cavett will talk about revenues. There'll be a discussion about the budget. In the afternoon, will be a discussion about housing and education, financing updates presentation. So just a reminder, we're working on that. We're also working on many other reports. I'm not going to talk on, you all get the revenue updates. We'll have a new revenue update to you in the next few days. So I was just going to mainly talk about the office itself. We've got some work on, we are in the process of negotiating. I think I mentioned to you all, we were wanting to hire an energy consultant to help us with the energy discussion as we go into that session. Understanding that we're not sure exactly what the scope of work will be, but it's useful to have experts available to us easily. So we are proceeding with that and negotiating with them and getting them under contract so they're available if and when we need them. What else did I want to tell you? I would like to mention two exciting people are here. I want to introduce you to Ezra Holden and James Duffy, if you all could stand up and so they can see you. Ezra is with Education Finance, he's on the left, and James is on the revenue team doing energy and other topics fees as well. And so we're very excited to have them. They started on Monday and it's great. So Phil, if you see their faces around, you can say hi to them.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
The briefing, see a lot of some of us. As for me.
A lot less.
I and I are off in the sunset. Well, if I might take a moment to, I wanted to note that there are two members here that we will not be working with in this next session. And I want to thank both Representative Lanfear and Senator Kitchell for all of your good leadership. It's been incredibly important to the Joint Fiscal Office and the Joint Fiscal Committee. And I just want to acknowledge how much you have meant, what a pleasure it's been to work with you, both of you, over many, many years. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
My car is not going to know how to go past exit 8. So I may just end up here out of habit. The only thing I would say, and I want to, and Diane as well, and that is the work that we've done to put our fiscal house in order. And so I think I personally feel, and you can speak, that we can feel really good. I know that in the world of politics, sometimes some of the really good work doesn't get referenced, and but we have a pension oversight meeting this afternoon. We bond rating got reaffirmed, reference to our good budgeting practices, and so I think that that's a really positive reflection that the leadership. I will put it out, the leadership of the legislature to really engage in good, sound budgeting practices, make tough decisions, and deal with some of our long-term liabilities that were going to haunt us. And the only thing I would say for those returning is that short-term expediencies usually come with a long-term cost. And there will be requests, and we've got to be really vigilant to maintain our budgetary integrity. And so I think we can feel good. We're leaving the finances of the state in very good condition. Our reserves are recognized as really important. They are much higher than they were when we first started out.
And I was looking at a newsletter that I wrote back in the Great Recession. I've been around long enough. Actually, state government at that point was going through, we took a salary cut.
Yes, we did.
State employees took a salary cut. Memories are very short in terms of what we ended up having to do to deal with that loss of revenues to the state. So the reserve is important. So I just think that it's reflective of the work that we all have done collectively and feel good about it.
Yep. And thank you for your commentary and Digger.
Yes, it was.
This week, I'm printing that out as a good summary
As a
of
reference.
the things that we should not forget that we've done. And it was really laid out well and clearly.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, so much of what we do gets overshadowed
Yes.
by what gets used. And obviously in this environment of re-elections, that much of what we've done. And I don't envy Ann's on the commission, but the hard thing is to understand that if you vote to spend more money locally, your taxes are going to go up. Your taxes have to go up. And there's just unfortunately this idea that there's some magical unlimited pot of money in Montpelier. And which is, we know working in the budget world is not the case. Or there's all kinds of inefficiencies or money being spent on things of lesser merit. And so all you have to do is go scoop that money. And it's very hard to overcome that kind of that psychology around about what Montpelier can and can't do. So thank you. I was trying to say we did some really good things.
We did. It was real. I printed it too because it's actually a very good summary.
Thank you. Yeah. So.
I just want to say thank you both also for your work on the transportation fund.
Oh, we have created the tip. That's.
No, well, Richie.
Yeah.
I was out
Again,
again
from
Richie.
You're talking about those 20% fee increases? $3.50 on your money after 7 years?
That's not what I was.
Oh, June, Richie was my.
You brought that up.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes. He did.
You were a good student.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Signing contract.
So with that, do you have anything more to add to?
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't need a motion to